The protagonist, once a promising soldier, finds himself unemployed and living with his mother after an accident in the army. Struggling with his new reality, he soon discovers a shocking ability, the power to predict the future. Determined to use it to his advantage, he starts making calculated investments, quickly turning a small fortune into a much larger one. His ultimate goal is clear: to become the world's greatest investor. In an ordinary Korean town, a reporter interviews people about what they would do if they suddenly received 100 million. Their answers vary, but all reflect the desire for financial freedom. The broadcast takes an unexpected turn when the reporter introduces the youngest Korean to ever become the richest man in the world, none other than the protagonist. She asks about his secret, even mentioning rumors that he can see the future. Smiling, he dismisses the idea, but at that moment, his eye gleams with a strange yellow light. He spots an elderly woman near the camera operator, and suddenly, a massive golden eagle bursts into the room, leaving cryptic words in its wake. Startled, the protagonist wakes up. It was all a dream. However, the eagle's appearance unsettles him. Why does it continue haunting his dreams? Reality sets in. He is still poor and unemployed, relying on part-time jobs to help his mother. His father had once provided a comfortable life, but now those days are gone. Later, he visits his friend, who still hoards his collection of girls' figurines. They joke about it before discussing their lives. The protagonist reveals his recent struggles but remains optimistic. His friend then shares shocking news. He has found the lost password to his old coin account. Years ago, the protagonist had earned virtual currency from selling a game character, but it had skyrocketed in value. As his friend reveals the current price, the protagonist quickly does the math, realizing he might be sitting on an unexpected fortune. The protagonist is shocked to learn that his friend has over 13 billion won in cryptocurrency. His friend explains that 1 million won is only equivalent to a single BNT coin, making his total wealth astronomical. Stunned, the protagonist jokingly demands 100 million won, arguing that it wouldn't affect his friend's fortune. However, his friend refuses, explaining that all his money is invested in an exchange platform, and he expects it to grow even more. Frustrated, the protagonist recalls that he had given one of his game characters to his friend to sell, so he asks for his share of the money. Before his friend can answer, the protagonist is distracted by something outside the window. He is shocked to see the same eagle from his dreams, this time in real life. The eagle radiates a powerful yellow light and leaves behind mysterious words in the air, which gradually become clear. As he deciphers the message, he realizes it is a warning that the Mountain Hill exchange platform will fail. Alarmed, he immediately asks his friend if he is certain the platform is safe. His friend, confused by the sudden concern, reassures him that there is nothing to worry about. But the protagonist feels as if he is going crazy. This eagle has appeared to him before, always delivering cryptic messages. Deciding not to ignore the warning, he frantically urges his friend to withdraw all his money immediately. Though skeptical, his friend gives in and asks his sister to retrieve the funds. Moments later, his friend receives shocking news: Mountain Hill's servers have gone down. However, the good news is that his sister managed to withdraw the money just in time, narrowly avoiding a massive financial disaster. The protagonist is even more convinced that he can predict the future when another shocking update arrives. The platform is back online, but all customer accounts are empty. Chaos erupts online as people complain about their vanished money. Meanwhile, one man approaches the protagonist, demanding honesty. Since he promised to reveal everything if he took the money, the protagonist decides to tell the truth. He has the ability to see the future. The scene shifts to a year ago when the protagonist was still in the army. It was during routine training when he first saw an enormous eagle. He pointed it out to the other soldiers, but they dismissed it, saying there was no eagle. As he followed its flight, strange smoke messages appeared, warning that KM-188 was about to explode. At that moment, he saw soldiers preparing a bomb test with the same name. Fear filled his eyes as he realized what was about to happen. Moments later, the bomb exploded on the ground, injuring and eliminating several soldiers. The protagonist barely survived, diving to the ground in time, sustaining only minor injuries. Back in the present, his friend is shocked but relieved that he survived. Most soldiers weren't as lucky. The protagonist recalls how doctors attributed his confusion to the accident. However, he has now predicted the future twice, and both times it was accurate. His friend suggests this might be a superpower, surprising the protagonist. Shifting focus, the protagonist demands his share, 1.2 billion. When questioned, he explains his calculations. However, the money is currently inaccessible. The protagonist suspects a hidden financial strategy, and his friend confirms that tax-related issues might require billions to be paid. The protagonist's friend, excited about his financial success, shares how he set up a tax haven and named his company OTK. When the protagonist jokingly suggests that OTK stands for otaku, his friend angrily denies it, explaining that it's actually based on his name. As they talk, the protagonist reminds him about the debt he owes. His friend reassures him that he will pay soon, as he needs time to transfer the money. The protagonist, confident, smiles back. The next day, the protagonist visits the bank to collect the money. He receives a deposit of 500 million, but his friend explains that the remaining 740 million is being handled by his sister, who is managing the funds. He asks for patience, and the protagonist agrees without hesitation. With the money in hand, his first thought is to help his mother take a break from work and buy her new clothes. He heads to a mall where he notices a crowd near the restroom, drawn by a heated argument. A rich blonde woman is humiliating an older lady, demanding that she kneel and apologize for allegedly dirtying her expensive shoes. The store manager, instead of defending the older woman, insists that she obey. The protagonist's expression turns to shock when he realizes the woman being humiliated is his mother. As she prepares to kneel to avoid losing her job, the protagonist steps in, pulling her away. When he demands an explanation, his mother, embarrassed, remains silent. The arrogant woman mocks him, asking who he is to interfere. He firmly states that he is her son, but his mother, fearing trouble for him, quickly denies knowing him. Hurt, he asks if she is ashamed of him, but she reassures him that she isn't. The arrogant woman is surprised to learn that the protagonist is the son of a cleaning worker. She smugly explains that his mother's mop barely touched her shoes, yet she insists on making a scene. The crowd watches in disbelief, and some even begin recording the incident as the protagonist refuses to let the humiliation continue. The woman smugly asks if the boy even knows the cost of her shoes, revealing they are worth 600,000. Annoyed by the arrogance, the protagonist pulls out the exact amount from his pocket and offers it to her. He demands that she apologize to his mother and take the money, or leave with just her shoes. Suddenly, someone announces that the scene is being filmed, pressuring the woman to accept the money. Weighing her options, she hesitates before reluctantly taking it, offering a half-hearted apology before walking away. The protagonist, however, isn't done. He calls the store manager and orders him to make sure he gets the shoes he just paid for. Confused, the woman watches as the manager quickly agrees. The protagonist then mocks her, saying he won't even wear them and will throw them away tomorrow. When the woman gets furious at being called old, he sarcastically thanks her for the reminder, further humiliating her. As she creates a scene, the protagonist and his mother calmly leave the mall. Outside, the mother suggests they go back and smooth things over, but the protagonist refuses. He promises that she will never have to endure such humiliation again and embraces her. Though still shaken, she gives a faint smile, touched by his determination. Later, while having a meal at a local restaurant, the protagonist shares everything about Bitcoin with his mother. She is shocked by the money it generates, but he reassures her that she no longer has to worry about his college fees. However, she insists that his college fund has been saved for a long time and he should still focus on his studies. Instead, he expresses his desire to buy a better home, believing their current small house is harming her health. When she protests, he asks her to accept it for her well-being. With a deep sigh, she says he is just like his father. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by an urgent phone call. The protagonist answers, and a panicked voice on the other end shouts that an emergency has occurred. The protagonist and a friend arrive at an upscale hotel in a flashy otaku car, attracting attention and laughter from passers-by. While the friend is embarrassed, the protagonist seems amused. Inside the hotel, they meet the friend's sister, a confident and assertive woman. She is surprised to see the protagonist there, and the conversation shifts to their time apart. When asked about his military service, the friend reveals he was recently discharged. She suggests working together at Golden Gate in the future, but the protagonist responds that he will only go if the company accepts him. The atmosphere turns serious as she brings up platform Mountain Hill's bankruptcy. The friend admits it collapsed but reassures her that he withdrew his money in time, securing over $10 million in an account under ODK Company. Relieved, she hands him a letter containing contact details for a key financial manager in case he needs assistance with large transactions. Curious, She questions why he sold all his shares at once instead of gradually. Unable to reveal his foresight, the friend casually responds that he simply felt like it. She clarifies that her visit isn't personal but business-related and will last 10 days. When he reacts with surprise, she challenges him, making it clear she has no problem staying in a luxurious hotel since her company is covering the costs. During their discussion, she receives a call about an upcoming OPEC meeting, catching the protagonist's attention. As she explains the organization's role in global oil production, a sudden vision flashes before the protagonist, an OPEC agreement on production cuts. Realizing its implications, he asks about the chances of this happening. His insight into the oil industry impresses her, as she explains the challenges and high costs of shale oil production in the US and how OPEC struggles to reach agreements due to conflicting interests. The protagonist discusses the upcoming OPEC meeting and its potential impact on oil prices with a few acquaintances. One person doubts an agreement will be reached, while another is curious about the protagonist's opinion. Realizing he has spoken too much, the protagonist quickly tries to change the subject. Later, he returns home and contemplates his prediction. If the deal works out, oil prices will skyrocket. Recognizing an opportunity, he decides to invest in oil futures. However, he is uncertain about how much money he can allocate as he has financial commitments, including a recent lease and funds set aside for his mother. Discussing the investment plan with a close friend, the protagonist explains how crude oil influences various industries beyond just fueling cars. His friend, eager to profit, decides to invest a large amount. The protagonist hesitates but ultimately agrees. While he cautiously invests a smaller sum, his friend insists on a higher amount. After some negotiation, they settle on an investment, knowing they must now wait for the OPEC meeting's outcome. The next day, the protagonist moves into a new home with his mother. Though the house is modest, it is clean and well-maintained. His mother is pleased, which reassures him despite his concerns that he could have provided a better place if not for his investment. While unpacking, he notices his mother hesitating over a box containing family photos, particularly those of his late father. Seeing her pause over a framed family picture, he is reminded of how deeply she cherishes those memories. The protagonist recalls his mother's long-held dream of owning a home, which his father made a reality by buying land and building their first house. He understands why his mother feels sentimental, as most of the family's memories are tied to that place. When he asks if she often thinks about his father, she admits that she does, regretting that his hard work took a toll on his health. As they pack, the protagonist takes note of the many things they still need, such as appliances and furniture. He suggests that his mother take a break from work, but she refuses, insisting she is still strong. However, after his persistent urging, she finally agrees to a 3-month break. At that moment, he hands her an envelope containing 100 million won, saying she can use it however she pleases. Shocked, she immediately scolds him, fearing he is recklessly giving away money. The protagonist assures her that she is not just anyone, she's his mother. She advises him to save it for a house or future expenses, but he insists she keep it. Reluctantly, she accepts, remarking that he is as stubborn as his father. Later that day, a friend arrives, carrying 2 bags of toilet paper as a housewarming gift. The protagonist, unimpressed, jokes that he would have preferred something useful like a refrigerator or washing machine. The friend loudly protests, accusing him of trying to extort him. As they sit in the empty room eating apples, they discuss the recent collapse of a major cryptocurrency exchange. The friend marvels at how the protagonist predicted the bankruptcy, suggesting he has an awakened superpower. The protagonist, startled, tells him to lower his voice, but the friend claps excitedly, insisting that this is how superheroes are born. The protagonist, deep in thought, decides to name his power the Eye of the Oracle. His friend, however, finds the name unappealing and reminds him of a more pressing matter, the outcome of the OPEC meeting. Despite the warning, the protagonist remains lost in thought, convinced that the name suits his ability. He even suggests that if his prediction about the meeting proves accurate, he will officially adopt the title. His confidence in his ability remains firm, though the weight of uncertainty lingers. The next day, his friend visits, eager to know the outcome of the prediction. However, the protagonist's focus is on his game, surrounded by food. His friend asks about his sister's response, but the protagonist only knows they will find out the answer tomorrow. Anxiety creeps in as he recalls the stock prices dropping another 3%, causing them to lose a staggering $100 million. His friend fears the worst, but the protagonist reassures him and invites him to play a game to ease their nerves. As they play, the protagonist struggles to shake the thought that financial ruin could be near. While engrossed in the game, the moment of truth arrives. The OPEC results are announced. His friend rushes to check the news, revealing that the oil-producing nations have agreed to cut production, causing international oil prices to soar. Their investment is paying off. In mere minutes, the price per barrel jumps to $73, and excitement fills the air. The protagonist anxiously waits as his friend checks their earnings. Suddenly, he shouts, "They've made $630,000, which translates to 700 million won. Factoring in their investment, they will receive a total of 800 million won. The realization sinks in. His power is real. His friend playfully suggests that he might be like a superhero. Unlike common powers like flight or super strength, the ability to foresee the future is irreplaceable. The protagonist now understands that his predictions can change lives, whether by preventing disasters or predicting crucial events. The protagonist covers his eyes as a surge of energy emerges, unsure of how it happened. He assumes it may have been due to an accident in the army, possibly awakening his power. His friend, however, questions why the ability only revealed itself now. Jokingly, he says that if he had this vision earlier, he would have used it to get rich in a casino. The protagonist recalls that after the accident, the prediction appeared only once, leading him to dismiss it as an illusion. Suddenly, another memory surfaces. The protagonist realizes that his friend's prediction appeared when they discussed financial matters, particularly the Bitcoin and OPEC meeting. This leads them to theorize that the ability may be tied specifically to finances. However, the protagonist points out that this doesn't explain the explosion in the army. His friend suggests that it was likely an exception because it involved a life-threatening situation. Then an idea strikes. His friend urgently asks about the events following the explosion. He speculates that the incident wasn't accidental but linked to corruption in military procurement. He rushes to check information on his computer, suspecting that the KM-188 bomb was defective from the start. His friend agrees, adding that most disasters are, in some way, financially motivated. Excited, the friend proposes a partnership. He will provide the money, while the protagonist uses his ability to predict financial outcomes. They would invest together and split the profits. Though the protagonist sees potential, he worries about losing money, as his predictions aren't guaranteed to be accurate. His friend insists that all three predictions so far have been correct and urges him to take the risk. He even jokingly threatens to end their friendship if he refuses. Before the protagonist can respond, he receives a call from an old university friend inviting him for drinks. Seeing this as an escape, he immediately agrees and leaves, ignoring his friend's protests. Later, he arrives at the bar and greets his university friends. One of them, a veteran, introduces two freshman girls. They exchange pleasantries, and the protagonist learns that his old friend has been struggling with work. The financial sector is undergoing major changes, and even new hires are being pressured to resign voluntarily. Shocked, the protagonist realizes that his friend's future is uncertain and wonders what will happen if he gets fired. The group spends the evening drinking as the conversation shifts to investments. One man expresses his frustration, claiming that while there are great entrepreneurs, his country lacks great investors. He wonders if a genius investor will ever emerge to save them. Meanwhile, another person receives a call and confirms their location to a friend, who soon arrives. The protagonist reacts with shock upon seeing the newcomer, a woman from his past. It is their first meeting since their breakup. Later, the two leave the bar to talk privately in a cafe. She asks about his time in the army, and he replies indifferently. When asked about her relationship, she quickly responds that things are fine. Their relationship ended when he was still in the army. She had fallen for a wealthy senior who briefly visited their university. The protagonist recalls how devastated he was upon learning about it. As they talk, she apologizes for breaking up with him during such a difficult time. He responds coldly, saying the past is behind them. She then confesses that she truly loved him, making him momentarily speechless. When he questions why she left if she felt that way, she admits she couldn't pass up the opportunity. When asked if she left for wealth, she doesn't deny it. Instead, she reveals that she wanted to achieve her dream, success. Later that night, while drunk, the protagonist reflects on the struggles of the past 2 years, his family's hardships, his father's funeral, and his mother's struggles. Suddenly, a mysterious vision appears, showing him a glimpse of his future. Determined, He rushes to his friend's house, mumbling about success. The next day, as they discuss investments, the protagonist realizes that despite his wealth, he lacks experience. His friend is eager to invest, but he remains uncertain, fearing failure. The protagonist remains cautious about investing a huge sum, knowing that making money is fun, but losing it is not. Meanwhile, another person is eager for the investment, but after recalling past predictions, he realizes he needs more information before committing. Over the past few days, the protagonist has been studying stock markets, oil prices, gold, and exchange rates to ensure he makes no mistakes. He also learns that while banks are now required to disclose information, they only release what benefits them, making truly valuable data scarce. He concludes that he needs insider knowledge, such as from influential organizations. One of his acquaintances advises him to be patient and suggests signing a contract before any partnership. This confuses the protagonist until the person explains that his sister always insists on having contracts in business. With that, an agreement is signed. Just as the discussion ends, the protagonist receives a call from an unknown number. The caller introduces herself as a girl he once met at a bar. Recognizing her, he agrees to meet. At the cafe, the girl thanks him for coming and shyly explains that she wanted to apologize for a past incident. She also mentions that if he returns next semester, they will be in the same class. Then, with some embarrassment, she asks for a favor. The protagonist assumes she is about to confess her feelings, but to his surprise, she only wants him to accompany her to buy a new phone. Feeling foolish for his assumptions, he hesitates but eventually agrees. They head to an electronics store, where she searches for a specific model. While she talks to the salesman, the protagonist reflects on how technology has advanced since his time in the army. Just then, he is struck by yet another prediction. The protagonist is intrigued when he receives a new prediction. While talking with the girl, he accidentally reveals that the L6 smartphone model will be discontinued soon. Realizing his mistake, he quickly dismisses it as a joke and leaves. Later, he rushes to his friend's house and shares the prediction. His friend is skeptical, as L6 is a top-selling model, and suggests that a patent dispute might be the cause. They recall that Sung Electronics had legal battles with NPL before, but the company always defended itself successfully. As they discuss the situation, they struggle to find a solid reason for the discontinuation. However, later that night, a sudden explosion startles them. The friend had been charging his L6 when it unexpectedly burst near his head. Shocked, they inspect the damaged phone and realize something is seriously wrong. The next day, the friend researches online and finds reports of similar incidents. Although Sung Electronics tried to cover up the cases, multiple users had posted about their devices exploding while charging. The company had dismissed the issue as external impact damage. Their suspicions grow stronger when a Sung Electronics engineer visits them. He offers compensation but warns them not to reveal the incident online until the official investigation results are released. This confirms the protagonist's belief that the company is aware of the issue but is trying to control the situation. The protagonist then considers how to profit from this knowledge. Unlike his previous predictions, where he could invest and make money easily, this time the situation is more complicated. His friend suggests short selling, but the profit margin remains uncertain. As they analyze their options, they realize that if L6 is discontinued, Sung Electronics could suffer massive financial losses, making this a major opportunity if they play their cards right. The protagonist believed that no stock would drop more than 20 to 30%, and investing 13 billion won to earn 3 to 4 billion was a massive profit. However, he still wanted a way to maximize his gains. Despite studying management in college, he couldn't recall anything useful, so he needed someone with expertise. He thought of a woman he knew but wasn't sure how to explain his knowledge of future events. Instead, he sought out a former investment club president, a man known as both a genius and a lunatic. This man had once made a fortune predicting stock trends but later lost everything when a risky investment failed. Now, he lived a modest life teaching math to students. When the protagonist found him, the man was reluctant at first but agreed to help. He explained the differences between futures and options, emphasizing the risks involved. The protagonist took notes carefully as the man warned that dealing with options could lead to devastating losses, just as it had for him. Despite the warning, the protagonist and his friend decided to go all in. They planned a strategy, investing 70% in options and 30% in short selling, betting on a massive drop in a major phone company's stock due to reports of exploding smartphones. They poured all their funds into the investment, confident in their prediction. However, after 2 days, the stock price unexpectedly rose by 8%, causing immediate losses. Panic set in as news reports continued, but the decline they expected was slower than anticipated. When the company finally responded, they announced compensation instead of discontinuing the phone, causing the stock to stabilize. In the end, their massive gamble resulted in only a 1% profit, far less than expected. The protagonist realized they might have miscalculated, and their high-risk bet had not gone as planned. The protagonist watches as the market crashes, realizing that he has lost a massive amount of money, around 600 million. Despite this, he remains composed, knowing he still has time before the company's official decision is made. His friend, on the other hand, is overwhelmed, regretting not making better bets. Meanwhile, a troubling vision haunts the protagonist, a plane in chaos due to a burning cell phone. When he wakes up, he senses that this vision is different from the others. He frantically checks the news and finds reports of another explosion caused by the same brand's latest phone. As days pass, the situation worsens. On the predicted day, news breaks of an airplane emergency landing due to another phone explosion. The global media erupts, and airlines begin banning the model from flights. The company's stock plummets by 133%, and an emergency board meeting is held. The vice president faces immense pressure but makes a bold decision: to discontinue the faulty product line, refund customers, and rebuild the brand's reputation. This drastic move shocks shareholders, but he remains firm, prioritizing the company's long-term survival over immediate losses. The announcement spreads like wildfire, causing investors to panic and abandon the company. The financial loss is estimated at 50 trillion, marking the worst crisis in its history. Investigators soon discover that someone had secretly purchased billions worth of shares before the incident, as if they knew what was coming. Suspicion rises, and they begin tracing the buyer. Meanwhile, the protagonist and his friend watch the stock prices collapse in real time, their excitement growing with every loss. As the numbers plummet, they realize they've won big, celebrating as their risky bets finally pay off. The protagonist reflects on his sudden change in fortune, from struggling financially to holding an unimaginable sum of money. He feels grateful but also uneasy, questioning why his predictions always revolve around money. His friend reassures him, reminding him that they turned 13 billion into 685 billion together, proving their partnership's success. Despite the excitement, they agree to keep their methods secret, fearing unwanted attention from intelligence agencies. While celebrating, the protagonist worries about the company's financial crisis, but his friend reassures him that they merely took advantage of an inevitable event. Even so, he feels uneasy profiting from someone else's loss. They discuss the next step, handling taxes, since receiving such a huge sum would attract attention. The protagonist considers opening a company in a tax haven to secure his wealth. His friend initially suggests reinvesting but realizes that multiplying their fortune further will only become harder. The protagonist recalls a prediction he once had about his ex but keeps it to himself. Testing their bond, he asks his friend to hold his hand, symbolizing their trust and loyalty. His friend, despite hesitation, agrees, proving his faith in him. To legally secure the money, they establish a company OTK in a tax haven, ensuring they avoid excessive taxes. However, his friend surprises him by tearing their 50-50 contract, insisting that the protagonist should take 80% while he keeps 20%. Though shocked, the protagonist eventually accepts, realizing he now has enough capital to move forward independently. With Christmas approaching, the protagonist decides to buy gifts, something he couldn't afford last year. He visits a real estate agency, surprising the attendant when he expresses his intent to buy a house rather than rent. As he browses properties, the next step in his journey begins. The family's dream home turned into a burden over time. The long commute and expensive repairs made it difficult to keep. Desperate to sell, the woman sought a real estate agency, but the market value dropped to 500 million. Unexpectedly, a young man offered 800 million, far above the asking price. This shocked her, making her suspicious of hidden motives. Encouraged by her husband, she tried to negotiate a higher price of 1 billion, but the buyer looked at another property instead. Panicked, she quickly lowered her price to 760 million, matching the competing house. She even promised an extra commission to the agent to sway the buyer back, and it worked. The protagonist sealed the deal, paying a deposit and offering an additional $20 million for moving expenses. He wasn't just buying a house, he was reclaiming a precious family memory. On Christmas Eve, he took his mother to see it, revealing that it was theirs once again. Overwhelmed with emotions, she wept, recalling the hardships they endured since losing it. He reassured her that everything was fine now. His friend, deeply moved, cried along with them. To ease his mother's worries, the protagonist explained how he earned the money, though he left out key details. He also revealed his plan to delay university and focus on investments, promising he wouldn't fall for scams. After celebrating Christmas together, the protagonist and his friend secured a luxurious new base for their ventures. While settling in, his friend suggested a shopping trip. Initially uninterested, the protagonist followed along, wondering what was so important. His friend's excitement soon revealed the answer, a state-of-the-art television that had just been released. The boys gather in the basement for an urgent discussion. One of them expresses concern about their recent investments, fearing they might attract unwanted attention. While some believe they did nothing wrong, others argue that profiting from short positions is often criticized. The protagonist decides they should explore alternative strategies to avoid suspicion. The discussion shifts to market fluctuations and how their company, OTK, must invest wisely. One suggests focusing on long positions while using short positions only in emergencies. Their goal is to expand OTK's power, acquire companies, and maximize profits. The plan is ambitious, doubling $670 billion in 2 years, but the team believes it's achievable if they establish an investment firm. The protagonist spends days analyzing stocks but finds nothing promising. Suddenly, a friend arrives with documents on a potential target. The protagonist realizes they have been investigating the wrong company. Their approach works for massive corporations but is problematic for smaller ones. Since OTK's investments significantly impact stock prices, predicting outcomes is difficult. They consider expanding into foreign markets but need experts with connections. One suggests recruiting a finance specialist, which the protagonist finds reasonable. The meeting is interrupted by a call from a furious woman, one of the boys' older sisters. She tracks them down and confronts her brother about his reckless spending. More concerning, her job at a global investment bank led her to discover a massive transaction linked to them. Authorities suspect insider trading and demand financial records. The protagonist quickly fabricates a story to cover their tracks, explaining that their decision was based on public information. Though the sister remains suspicious, her position prevents immediate legal action. However, the boys now realize they are dangerously close to a major financial scandal.